Hello, hello, hello out there. Welcome to tonight's stream where we will be analyzing the Emperor card. As always, if you're watching this one not live, feel free to fast forward until about 5 minutes in. That is when I intend to get into the specifics of the stream. And for now, we're just going to set up in the first 5 minutes. So fast forward if you don't want to see that, if you're watching when this is not live. We will indeed be talking about the Emperor card, the fourth card of the Major Arcana, and the fifth card that we are going over on this channel. So how do we look and sound? Excellent. So yes, I will try to get started right at the 5-minute mark of this stream. Getting everything set up now. Greetings and salutations to you, Tianbi. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy you're here. Just going to get everything set up, and we will begin in exactly 3 minutes and 25 seconds. Talking about the Emperor card. This card, I think, should be particularly interesting. It should be all right. I think it should be particularly interesting. I think it will likely raise a lot of interesting topics for discussion that perhaps we haven't gone over yet in our tarot streams, I guess. So we're at almost 3 minutes, so just another 2 minutes and we shall begin. Now begins my look at the Emperor card. Come join the stream. That is my tweet. As for the vibration I'm in while delivering this material, I've run into a little bit of resistance today, but nothing too unusual, I suppose. Don't know why this isn't loading. We're blurry. Let me fix that. Should be able to relax and focus and concentrate on the material easily enough, but it should be interesting to see how I do with some level of resistance active. A sneaking suspicion that the resistance active in my vibration and it's coinciding with this stream is perhaps not a coincidence. I think perhaps it may be connected. But we'll see. We'll see. Recent new realizations recently that, oddly enough, in a way I can see them tying into the Emperor card, so perhaps we'll talk about that too. Anyway, we're almost at 5 minutes here, so we are about to begin. All right, so this is what will probably be part 1 of my presentation on the Emperor card, because we're going to stream here for about, I'm planning an hour and a half, 2 hours this session, and then I'll have lunch, come back, and stream for probably a good 4 hours or so. We'll have to see, and really dive deep into this card. As usual, I'll just make my preliminary remarks. This is going to be my interpretation of the Emperor card. I'm going to try to get it on screen. It's going to be my vision, the way that I see it, the way I interpret it, in line with everything that I come to know and believe and understand and stuff like that. My interpretations are going to differ from time to time from many other interpretations, and that's fine. That's all part of the process, or that's all part of any kind of art, I suppose. It's natural, it's to be expected. And again, I want to say, as I've said in other streams on tarot, I am by no means claiming to be an expert on these subjects. I have studied them for a couple of years now and studied them quite a lot, and used the tarot personally almost every single day of my life for over 2 years now. And so while I'm not claiming to be an expert on them, I certainly believe I've gained a significant amount of knowledge about them, and I'm very happy and excited to share that knowledge with all of you. It's a lot of fun for me. That's why I'm doing this. I'm just interested in having fun, basically, as always. And so I will share what I know about the card as best I can. And it's a learning experience for me too. Like, I'm here to help teach those of you, or to teach those of you who choose to watch these and are interested in this material. But I'm also learning more myself throughout the process. So that's what will be happening. As for the specific segments of the stream, I will, of course, I'm going to give my interpretation of the card, and then I will take your comments and questions as usual. Then we'll look up additional interpretations, and I'll give you my interpretation of those interpretations. So same format as always. So let's get right into it. This is the Emperor card, card 4 of the Major Arcana, and the 5th card we were talking about, because the first card is the Fool card, which is numbered 0. This is a card that has a lot to do with order and structure, with authority, with the time in one's journey where you seek out an authority figure to help you, to advise you, to guide you, to counsel you in whatever it is that you're working on, or your quest, or your goal, your project, whatever it happens to be, your journey. What else could be said along those lines? This could be representative of the structures in place that you have to sort of consult or work with in order to get to where you want to be. So it's like, you know, if you're trying to work for a particular organization, you're going to have interactions with authorities. You're going to have interactions with people who already work at that organization, and authorities in that, you know, you're going to have to get hired, and you're going to have a boss, or you're going to have a supervisor, or whatever. The Emperor card represents that authority figure, basically speaking, and the part of your journey where you must consult and work with that authority figure. And I guess I would say the challenge here with this card, if there is a challenge, and I think oftentimes there is that a lot of times, I think, and rightfully so, we can have a problem with authority figures, because we're always so, it would seem, naturally cognizant and on the lookout for abuses of power and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that all authority is inherently bad. I think that's what the message of this card is getting at, is that authority and like teachers, advisors, even like bosses, CEOs, things like that, they are natural parts of the human experience, basically speaking. And what else could you say for this card? You know, people like government officials and civil servants and teachers and people who are working for the public would be another area of this. But the main point is that authority is a natural part of the human experience. It's not always some negative thing. We've come to associate that idea so much with corruption because there have been so many, I guess, corrupt authorities. But that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean that it's always bad, basically speaking. That doesn't mean that it's always corrupt. It's a natural part of the human experience. So I think I've explained that pretty thoroughly. I'm just going to put the card down for now. What else can we say about the Emperor card? So as you can see, let me just show you again here real quick. It is indeed card 4 of the major arcana. So 4s have to do with this idea of order and structure. They're going to correspond to the 4th house, which corresponds to the sign of Cancer, which, funny enough, is an emotional sign, a water sign. And yet the Emperor, of course, is ruled by Aries, and we'll try to get into more of that later. But what I really want to focus on right now is this idea of order and structure and safety and security that the number 4 implies. And I guess to take that a bit further, this is almost a bit of a theory of mine at this point, but I'll throw it in because it's interesting. I've almost noticed, or it almost seems like as I've been studying these things for a couple of years now, that 4s can also talk about this idea of completion to some extent. Whereas normally 10s, the number 10 is about completion. And yet, every time there's a 4, it seems like there's some idea of almost like a completion of a temporary stage or something like that. Like maybe reaching a plateau, so to speak, in your experience and completing like one phase of things and then moving on to more. So I don't know, that part's just kind of a theory for me at this point, like I said, because 10s are really the number that is, or 10 is really the number that is all about completion. But I think 4s may have some of that as well. And if we're going to look at it astrologically, we would say, well, Cancer versus Capricorn. Well, Cancer and Capricorn are opposite signs, which, at least in the way I see things, means they're going to be linked in some ways. They're going to have some parallels in some ways. And you can definitely see it with this idea of order and structure and safety and security. Both signs relate to that in powerful ways, basically speaking. So regardless, though, the Emperor card is indeed one of order and structure. And of course, it would have to be, any authority figure is going to have that order and structure as an inherent part of their authority, basically speaking. So, what else can we say about the Emperor here? He, of course, talks about rulership. He talks about command. We have this idea of course, obviously, the masculine counterpart to the Empress that we went over last week. So the Empress had that feminine energy, and I did mention in that stream like a little bit of how the Emperor that we would be analyzing next time has the masculine energy, which is, of course, a much more, how should I say this? The masculine energy, which is that outward thrust, that creative act, that rather than being so flowing, being more structured and things of that nature. And so by that measure, the Emperor can also be said to represent powerful male figures, like powerful father figures, men of power, basically speaking, as opposed to women of power, which would be the Empress that we saw last week. So the Emperor is that strong male figure. He's the very stern, strict father, basically speaking, who is going to lay down the rules. Now, again, people, some people are going to have a problem with that because they think, well, what about people who are abusing their power? And it's like, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Abuses of power are very problematic, and that would be more the Emperor reversed, by the way. we'll get into more of that later. But this idea of power and of someone laying down the rules and having a father as well, that's a huge component we could talk about. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. Like, and I almost feel like I shouldn't even have to say that, but like, it's what I'm arguing, and I think what the tarot is basically saying is that it's natural and normal to have basically rules, or at least guidelines, that are followed, that are laid down by an experienced authority figure. And it's natural to have, if not like a literal father, then at least a father figure in one's life, just like it's natural to have, if not a literal mother, then like a mothering figure, basically speaking. And so I don't know, what else can we say about that? Wait, this from Morningstar, nice, thank you. So yeah, it's natural and normal to have this kind of like healthy father figure, and to have someone who is sort of establishing rules and boundaries and stuff like that. And speaking of boundaries, that's another interesting area we can perhaps get into with this card. So the Emperor card is going to correspond to the Devil card, card 15. Like, this is basically, again, where if you line these up on the Sephiroth of the Tree of Life, these two would share the same Sephiroth. And so there are some very interesting connections between the Emperor and the Devil card, and maybe we can get into those later at some point. But what I'm wanting to say here is the Devil card, being ruled by Capricorn, is very much about boundaries. And when I look at the Emperor card, I would say, yeah, I'd say indeed this card is also very much about boundaries, like very much about boundaries, the importance of having healthy boundaries. And with that, I could also say, with the card being ruled by Aries, Aries is, of course, what? The sign of the self, talking about the self, the individual. Well, you can't have a self, you can't have an individual without there being a boundary separating that individual from other individuals. You know, it's funny because, I don't know, it's very weird timing, but just before I went live, literally minutes before I went live, the planet Neptune stationed direct, and Neptune is the planet that talks about oneness, like we're all one. Well, this card is talking about the opposite of that, and the energy of like Capricorn ruled by Saturn is talking about the opposite of that. I'm going to try to keep this relatively simple in the early stages here, and then we can get more into the complexities later. But I think it's funny that we're talking about a card right now, the Emperor, that's talking about the importance of boundaries and having healthy boundaries, right after the planet of having no boundaries just went direct. Literally, the stream started 18 minutes ago. Well, let's see, 8:16, literally about 8 minutes after Neptune went direct, which is a planet of no boundaries. We're talking about, well, I went live with the stream, and we're talking about this card that's talking about having boundaries and the importance of that. So that's some of the most important stuff there. Let me think of what else we can perhaps get into here for a moment. By the way, I would say, let me fix that blurriness. I would say that most of what I've gone over so far with this card is more or less what people in general who study the tarot would say about it. You know, maybe with some differentiations, but I think I've said it, you know, these are more or less accepted things as far as I can tell. But let's see here. Before we get more into the interpretations, I want to make sure I cover everything. Well, it's interesting to me that the Emperor has this like armoring or something. Looks like he's wearing armor, basically, with his legs and feet there, as if to say that, as if to say or emphasize more this stern structure that the Emperor card represents, and the very natural and normal part of life, part of human consciousness that represents, the very valid and important part of human life that represents. Because again, for those who might have forgotten from my previous streams or weren't here, one of the biggest reasons I'm talking about these cards and why they're so important and why I see them as so important is that they represent parts of human life, human consciousness, basically speaking. Like, by studying the cards, you study yourself. You come to understand yourself more as you understand the cards more, and it's really very valuable. You understand the different areas of life and how natural and normal those are, including the challenges of life. You're an Aries, Xiaombi. Well, then this is your card, the Emperor. Lucifer Lee is also an Aries. Fascinating. Well, this is your stream then. Funny enough, though, really the first few cards of the Major Arcana are ruled by Aries for reasons that even I'm still kind of unsure of, though I have my theories. But the Emperor card is the most Aries card of all the Aries cards, basically speaking. So, let's see. You can also see he has this idea, or he has this long white beard representing age and wisdom, representing that the Emperor is this authority figure of great experience and wisdom that you go to for advice, for counseling, for to work with on some project, to get into the kind of work that maybe you want to do, or a school you want to get into, or whatever it happens to be. The Emperor represents that wise authority and wise administration. So, of course, much more can be said about the card and its like human consciousness meanings, but perhaps we can get more into that later. I've gone over like what I think are the most important things so far. So now let's talk a little bit about what happens if you get this card in a reading. What does it mean in a typical tarot reading? Well, it can mean a number of things depending on the cards around it and the question. It's going to, of course, talk a lot about order and structure. As I said, it's going to represent an authority figure. A lot of times it will appear when there's an actual person that the querent is encountering or going to encounter or has encountered perhaps, who is an authority figure, and that they will consult or have consulted, that is someone of great advice and great wisdom and stuff like that. It talks a lot about willpower, about that masculine energy, that creative force, that creative thrust that goes out, that willpower, which we should probably talk about the creative process some as well. Again, just go over that. But in a typical reading, I would say it can sometimes appear when there's a need for willpower, when there's a need to make sure that you're being disciplined and focused, and applying your willpower in productive ways. And that gets into a bunch of stuff too that I hope I can speak of more specifically later, because basically speaking, it is my thesis that most people have a misunderstanding and therefore a misapplication of willpower a lot of the time. And so I'm hoping that we can get into that. But let's talk more about the creative process, though, at least briefly, real quick. So I mentioned this last week, but it's important to talk about it again because now we're on the other side of the creative process. The Emperor card, as I said, represents that masculine energy. Well, whenever you launch a desire, that represents that powerful asking, that powerful desire emanating forth you, shooting out into the universe, if you want to think of it that way. as something that you want, something that you want to create, that creative spark or whatever. That's the masculine side of things. Then what happens? The universe basically assimilates it, and in order to create it, you have to then allow the energy to flow back through you. And try to stick with me here. I know these are nebulous terms, like if you're new to this, but I'll do the best I can to simplify it. But that allowing step, that allowing part of the equation represents the feminine energy, which we had last week with the Empress. So this week we have the Emperor representing the initial launching of a desire, the initial launching of an intention to create something. This is a card that corresponds to the moments in life when you know what you don't want. And by knowing what you don't want, you then know what you do want. So I guess you could also say it corresponds to then that new awareness of knowing what you do want. And then the Empress, which we had last week, the feminine energy, talks about that allowing state you have to get in, that state of surrender, as some people have called it, or just a state of allowing, that then basically allows the universe to do what it does and allows your desire to manifest. And so both the masculine and feminine energies are necessary to this process of creation. And it's interesting that in the tarot, they give you the feminine energy first and then the masculine energy second, which appears to be the other way around from the creative process. But I'm sure there's a good reason for that. I don't happen to know what that is, though. But yes, they give you the Empress first, that allowing energy. Then they give you the Emperor, the creative spark energy. But I mean, as you'll see as the weeks go on with these streams, the major arcana in tarot takes many twists and turns, and so I don't know if it's as simple as what I even just described, but yeah, that's what we have. We have with the Emperor card that moment of asking for something, that moment of launching a desire, that moment of launching an intention to create something. And I hope we can get into more of that later. So that's, yeah, just to reiterate, if it appears in a spread, it's most often going to talk about discipline and willpower. It's going to talk about order and structure. It's going to talk about wise administration, consulting an authority figure, consulting a teacher, a guru, or a boss, or an executive, or a doctor, or something, some authority figure, or some specialist even perhaps, although that might be pushing the meaning a little bit, I'm not sure, but you get the idea. And so, let's see, there are many more things that could be said, but I think now would be a good time. First of all, if anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to ask away in the chat. I'll do my best to answer. And second of all, right after that, we will get into, we will look up some additional interpretations of this card. And when we come across certain things that I really want to elaborate on from my own perspective, then we will stop and I will elaborate on them, and I'll tell you exactly what I think of some of these different perspectives of the Emperor card, because I guarantee you what I think and what a lot of other people think about this card, as usual, are not the same. And I look forward to clarifying all of that for all of you. So, any comments or questions, please ask away now. They can be about this card, or like tarot in general, or whatever, related subjects if you want. Also, while you guys ask your questions, I'm going to put a hoodie on because it is kind of cold in here. right. I'm back. Let's clear up that blurriness. All right, no comments or questions. That's fine. Then we shall continue with the various meanings, the various other interpretations of this card. Just pulling it up on my tablet here. Yes, we'll go over these. Going to be live for at least another hour, probably more like an hour and a half. Then I'll take a break to go have lunch. Then I'll come back for what will hopefully be a good 4 hours, and we'll really dive deep into this card, as deep as we can. All right. Though, I guess at the same time, if we have to end a bit early, like if we get over, or if we talk about most of the material faster than expected, well, then maybe I'd end the stream early. But it all depends on also, like, those of you that watch and how much discussion gets going and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens, is basically what I'm saying. I like this card, Goat Head. Haha. Huh. Wait, Goat Head? That would almost be like more the Devil card, sort of. But anyway, so this says Emperor description. The Emperor is the complement to the Empress. He is the masculine principle, the animus, the patriarch. He represents power and authority, and his stern attitude is quite a departure from the sensual beauty of the Empress. Behind his throne are barren mountains, a symbol of the lofty heights of which he is master. The throne itself is decorated with 4 ram's heads, representing intellectual heights and sure-footedness in climbing the lofty crags. His right hand holds an ankh, Egyptian symbol of life, and in his left is an orb representing the world over which he rules. So, interesting stuff there. You can kind of look at the symbolism that I was just talking about. Throne being decorated with 4 ram's heads representing intellectual heights and sure-footedness in climbing the lofty crags. His right hand holding the ankh, Egyptian symbol of life, and his left hand an orb representing the world over which he rules. And of course the mountains in the background, symbol of the lofty heights of which he is master, it says. So very interesting stuff. Keep in mind also, I want to remember to throw in this information from time to time because it's very important in understanding these cards. So our more like basic or subconscious mind are, I'm not an expert on this, I have to be honest, I'd have to look up more, or I'd have to look into this more to know which specific part of the brain as well as the mind it is, but basically the subconscious mind thinks in images and symbols. It's really the conscious mind that thinks more in like words and stuff like that. So a symbol is very powerful, and a symbol is going to have the well, really only the meaning that you assign to it, but symbols, pictures, images, they say a lot to the mind. And so when you look at these cards and you come to understand them, it's like purifying your own vibration through the purity of the cards, through the pure vibration of the cards that the cards represent. You purify your own vibration by becoming attuned to the pure vibration that the cards represent, or simply are. It's like Baphomet. Exactly, Luciferly, exactly. And that's a very interesting thing to bring up real quick. And I'll just try to go over this real quick. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Emperor corresponds to the Devil card, which is indeed in that Baphomet symbol, basically, in that Baphomet pose, one hand up and the other hand down. And I believe there's a very important reason for that correspondence. And interestingly enough, we also saw that in the Magician card, right? card 1 of the Major Arcana, the Magician card, which talks about recreating one's reality as they see fit and having the tools with which to do that, working with the tools. So what I'm thinking here, like with that Baphomet connection, if we look at the Magician, if we look at the Devil card, is, let's see. So we have this idea of taking the divine power and channeling it to the lower realms. You can't quite see my arms fully here, but whatever. I'll do the best I can to explain this. And of course, you also have the classic idea of as above, so below. And I'm not sure, like I said, I'm still learning, this stuff too. Like there's so many things that I still don't know. I'm not sure if there's a direct connection between Baphomet and the ideas associated with Baphomet and the Emperor card, but there might be. I wouldn't be surprised if there were, and maybe we'll get deeper into that at some point. Maybe even just that idea of, authority. There's the authority above, and then there's the authority below, that kind of hierarchical connection. So I don't know for sure, but what I am saying is I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of connection there, because we see it in the Devil card, which corresponds to the Emperor card. And there's even a tiny possible connection that, again, is much more a theory of mine, between the Emperor card and this idea of the Magician and even Mercury and communication. But one thing at a time here. Maybe we'll get more into that later. What about the planet Venus? Could you be more specific? Like, what are you specifically asking about the planet Venus? We had the planet Venus last week with the Empress card, and this week with the Emperor, we have the planet Mars. Mars rules the Emperor, which I suppose I should have mentioned that earlier, but oh well. Yes. Mars. Passionate, determined, warlike, aggressive, action-oriented, physically oriented, willful, all about willpower, about sexual energy, about anger, about being impulsive, all of these sorts of things we have with Mars, and that does rule this card, as does Aries, and Mars, of course, rules Aries. So all of that energy is basically interconnected with the Emperor as well. So, and I mentioned this card corresponding with the Devil card. Well, it's like, don't think of the Emperor card as representing authority in the way that the Devil card does, because the Devil card is that calm, cold Capricorn energy, that isn't going to be all about like acting all at once and taking such spontaneous action and stuff like that. Whereas the Emperor card is, at least the potential is there for being much more hot-headed and being much more spontaneous and willing to act at a moment's notice and stuff like that. So that's an interesting differentiation, I would say, an interesting dichotomy, basically speaking. But yeah, as for like Mars and Venus, well, Mars is the masculine principle and Venus is the feminine principle. And that is indeed why, of course, Mars rules the Emperor and Venus rules the Empress. So that's basically how Venus fits into this most, I would say. All right, now let's get into some meanings. When the Emperor comes up in this position, you are about to be granted an audience with a powerful individual who has the wherewithal to help you with personal plans. The Emperor administers and governs the realm you wish to enter. You cannot achieve your dreams without this person's blessing. By making a visit to the leader in the field, you can begin to benefit from the established structure. With the Emperor's support, you have a much better chance of actualizing your dream. Yeah, I would say that's very, very important. What's also very important to consider here is, let me think if I can explain this properly. This idea that you do indeed, as I always tell people, create your own reality. And people might say, well, what is this then? You need this, you're saying you need this authority, you need this established structure to create something you want. And I say yes, because everything is a co-creation. Every creation involves other people, one way or another. And so it's not a contradiction whatsoever. Think of human consciousness like this giant ocean of energy, right? And each person is like a point, or almost like a, I wish I could think of a good way of putting this. Not quite a droplet in the ocean, because that would imply that there's no individuality, but think of each human consciousness or each person as an individualized droplet in that ocean. And that droplet can decide where it goes and what it does, but it's always doing so within the overall context of the ocean, and that ocean is human consciousness. So I think with that analogy, you can understand how, yes, we each create our own reality, and we do it as co-creative partners with, in theory at least, or by extension, I would say, the entire rest of the human race. So it might seem like a paradox, but really it is not. We are both individually responsible for our individual creations, and also collectively responsible for each thing that every individual creates. So I hope that makes sense. Also, I am receiving an impulse right now to post to Instagram that I'm live right now. Perhaps get some more people to join in with us. So I'm going to do that real quick. If anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to ask. This will just take a moment or two. And I see we are blurry. I really ought to redo my Poetic Heretic Instagram sometime. It needs some adjustments. But anyway. Hey everyone, I'm live right now talking about the Emperor card in Tarot, talking all about it at Poetic Heretic, or youtube.com/poeticheretic90. There's a link in my bio. You can see I'm live right there. You can see the card right there. Please come join us. Come watch. Hey everyone, I'm live right now talking about the Emperor card in Tarot, talking all about it at Poetic Heretic, or youtube.com/poeticheretic90. There's a link in my bio. You can see I'm live right there. You can see the card right there. Please come join us. Come on. Hey everyone, I'm live. All right. That'll be good. As above, so below. Indeed. That is that idea of Baphomet. Apparently it's busy uploading. It's still, all right, fine, whatever. All right, let's get right back to it. An upright emperor in a relationship question can be seen as the head of the household, a man who is all things to everyone, husband, father, primary breadwinner, chief executive officer. That reminds me, let's talk about, real quick, because I didn't go over this earlier, what happens if you see the emperor reversed in a tarot reading? Well, my most common interpretations, if I see that, is that if you're getting the emperor reversed in a reading, it's probably a sign that you need to exercise more willpower and more discipline. You need to be more focused. You need to not be too like wishy-washy or anything like that. You know, you need to incorporate that masculine energy more. It can also represent potentially the idea of corrupt authority and like the corrupt father figure, you know, someone who is abusing their power, basically speaking. And let me think, anything else? Well, many things theoretically, but I'm just going over the most common ones. I guess it could be said to represent someone who is lacking in that masculine energy, again, depending on the situation or the energy of I guess one could even say having character, which there's other issues associated with that, but you know, of being willing to, you know, go out and get the things that you want. You know, if you get the Emperor reversed, you could be lacking in that attribute or aspect, I suppose. And it also talks about this idea, and maybe we can get more into this later, hopefully, but of well, the boldness of say Aries and Mars that rule this card, the boldness in life, the times in life where you need to sort of tell it like it is, and the times where you need to say things that need to be said. You know, sometimes you have to be bold and you have to tell someone something that they're not going to like hearing, but it still needs to be said. You know, there are times where maybe there's an injustice that needs to be talked about. You know, it needs to be brought to light. Someone has to be bold enough to be willing to actually bring these things to light, even though no one wants to say these things. Just because no one really wants to say these things doesn't mean they don't need to be said. That is my thesis about all of this. And so the Emperor represents that as well. The time where you need to say to someone, be like, look, what you're doing is not okay, or you really need to improve in this area and that area. Now, obviously, that doesn't always mean that the person saying that is automatically right and the other person wrong, but simply that there are times where that kind of boldness, that kind of potentially crossing a line is actually appropriate, is actually needed. It is important. It is, this might really throw your brains into a twist, but I would say it is actually, in those situations, the path of least resistance. And so that's what I would say about that, the Emperor representing those times in life, you know. And maybe we can get more into this later, but it also brings to mind this idea of criticism. And of course, that's going to be much more of a Virgoan thing. And, you know, we'll get into that when we get to like the Hermit card, basically. Although actually also maybe the Lovers because of other correspondences, but whatever, we'll see when we get there. But I just want to say right now, this idea of criticism. Well, I've noticed, especially in recent times, that a lot of people are not comfortable with criticism. That a lot of people don't even seem to understand the importance and even necessity of criticism, of saying these perhaps difficult things that need to be said. And a lot of people, it seems like, are getting offended at criticism, at constructive criticism, stuff that's meant to help you, help better you, and just thinking that it's the person like personally attacking them or hating on them or something like that. And it's like, if there's one thing that I wish that I would like humanity to sort of get through their heads right now, is that it's that there is a very big difference, a very fine line between criticism and hate. Criticism is constructive. Criticism is productive. Criticism is helpful. And it's pointing out like where things are not as good as they could be, or things that are potentially wrong or whatever. Whereas hate is just saying, oh, you suck, you know, you're a shitty person, your content is shitty, or whatever your art is shitty, you're awful, and just like basically anything that's sort of calling the person names or personally attacking them, that's hate. And I agree, that's not okay. And that, that should people who choose to engage in that kind of behavior do indeed need to be held accountable for their actions. But it's not criticism. Criticism is a whole different thing. So maybe we can get more into that later, but I just want to mark that here because I think it's highly appropriate for the Emperor card. And I'm glad that this card is bringing up this kind of discussion. It's one of the things I like about doing these tarot streams is it brings up important, I guess, issues or points of discussion that are just really important for humanity to hear, or at least however many people I can reach with these streams. I know it's not a lot right now, but whatever. I'm interested in doing what I can because I want to. Anyway, like I said, maybe we can get more into that later. Sorry to keep you waiting, Tiombi. Is there a connection between Venus and Lucifer? Why, yes, I believe there is, but that may be a whole different thing, but I'll do my best to tell you what I know. So, from what I've come to understand over the years, there's well, first of all, in the name, there's a connection that goes back to the Latin origins or something like that of Venus, of the word or name Venus, with the word Lucifer. And even this idea of Lucifer being the morning star, well, Venus is also known as the morning star. And that ties into a number of things. And, well, we could also say, okay, Venus, the feminine principle, Lucifer versus God, this sort of anthropomorphized idea or version of God, this sort of like Christian and like other like major religions idea of God as being this like heavenly father, that kind of father figure. Funny enough, as we're talking about the Emperor card. Well, let's look at that. Let's fill in some gaps here and just see if we can figure some things out. So, as some of you might remember from previous streams, it's basically my thesis that the God that developed from religions that evolved into like Christianity and stuff like that is one that is essentially a personification, or at the very least a reflection of the ego and or the egoic state of consciousness in humanity. Like humanity, when they developed the ego, needed a religious drama that reflected that would sort of function as a framework for that. And so we have this idea of God, but it's this egoic God, and that's going to associate it with this much more masculine energy rather than the feminine. So what is opposing God, as people say? Well, they'll say Satan or Lucifer. Now, Satan and Lucifer are very different things. That's a whole nother issue. But to try to keep this simple here, let's say, okay, well then Lucifer must be what? The feminine side of things. Lucifer and its association with Venus is probably no accident because of this whole like drama that is unfolded. And so I don't know, if you're going to ask me, that would be my interpretation of it. I would look at it that way. Again, I'm sort of like theorizing here, but some of these things I think are fairly established at this point also. I think Lucifer is the sort of necessary counterpart to this idea of the Christian God or whatever, and represents that feminine energy, but not necessarily, in fact, probably in many ways, definitely not in the same way that like Mars versus Venus is, or the Emperor versus the Empress is. Like, you know, not every parallel is going to hold, basically, is what I'm saying. But yes, there does appear to be a very interesting story there, and hopefully, I don't know, hopefully in my own ongoing research into these various things, I'll come across more information about this. I'm sure I will sooner or later, especially now that we're talking about it. I'll probably attract more of it one way or another. But yeah, for now, I sense there's more to be told there, and I look forward to figuring more of it out, hopefully. But that's about the extent of what I know about that, at least that I can think of right now. Trying hard to connect with Lucifer, Father Lucifer. Yeah, that's, well, you can think of it that way too. You know, like I said, it's not all cut in stone or whatever. Not every parallel holds. Which is a funny thing though, because when you think of like the Devil card in tarot, the naming of that card is no coincidence. It definitely has an association. Probably not the association that the average person would think, but definitely an association with this idea of Satan as well as Lucifer. And but what we see with that card is definitely not feminine energy. Absolutely not. It's strong masculine energy. It's a card of manifestation. Hell, even the Emperor card that it corresponds with could be, you know, a sort of manifestation. So, you know, there's different like shades of meaning and stuff here. And like I said, I'd like to figure out the rest of the story that I sense that there is to this, and hopefully I do over time. But for now, I think that's about all I know about that. There's a weird sort of interplay though. One could even maybe say, could it be that Satan is the masculine counterpart of Lucifer? Lucifer is the feminine. I don't know. But see, trying hard to connect with Lucifer. Depending on what you mean by connect, I could maybe give you some information on that, but I'm not quite sure. Like if you're really trying to dive in and understand the idea of Lucifer more, well, not to sound like I'm trying to make everything very simple, but if you want to understand any subject more, simply start focusing upon it and you'll attract more information about it. It really is that simple. Of course, these days with the internet, it's very simple indeed to like Google something, but it's not the Googling and it's not the dry intellectual information that makes the difference, you see. No, instead, it is the, how do I say this? When you focus upon anything, whether it be a tarot card or Lucifer or anything, you are connecting vibrationally with that, just in that focus. So I would say if you want to connect with Lucifer, you want to connect with anything or anyone, begin focusing on whatever that is. Simply focus upon it. And yes, a great way of doing that is to like read stuff about it, watch videos about it. I mean, if you're going to accept my advice about a lot of things, you know, make lists of positive aspects about whatever it is that'll line up your vibration in a very positive way with whatever it is that you're focused upon. So make lists of positive aspects about the thing that you want to connect with. That's a way of doing it. Anything you can do to focus upon it will connect you with it, basically speaking. And if you can just relax and allow the process to take care of itself, then you've got nothing to worry about. So anyway, very interesting discussion points. Thank you guys. Very interesting discussion points that are developing here. But let us continue now. The Emperor represents order and regulation, balance the free-flowing abundance of the Emperor. He advocates a four-square world where trains are on time, games are played by rules, and commanding officers are respected. In chaotic situations, the Emperor can indicate the need for organization. Ends should be tied up and wayward elements harnessed. In situations that are already over-controlled, he suggests the confining effect of those constraints. It's also interesting to consider, like, the there are people in this world who are very much wanting things to be done in a very orderly manner, basically speaking. They want everything to be predictable and in place and stuff like that. And we see that a lot with this Cancerian energy that is connected to the Emperor, with the card being a 4. So I'm asking people to try to stretch their minds a little bit here, because even though, again, this card is very much an Aries card, it's also connected to 4th house matters, with it being a 4, which corresponds to the sign of Cancer. And so we have this idea, again, of the order and structure and security. And that's why the Emperor is like that. He likes things that are in order. Or the point I'm really wanting to make here is that there are many people who like things to be done in a very orderly way. And then there are many people who want to do everything intuitively. And both types can, or well, how should I say this? I think it can be very challenging at times for the two types to get along. You know what I mean? Like, one can almost drive the other crazy, you know, because one wants to do everything in the moment and the other wants to do everything in a very orderly and structurally way. And so it's interesting, though, because the Emperor, you could almost say, oh, well, the card's ruled by Aries. You'd think he'd be one to do things in the moment. Well, possibly it can manifest like that, but what we're really talking about here, that the energy of order and structure is too strong on this card, I believe, as far as I can tell anyway, for that to be the case, basically speaking. It's too strong on this card for the Emperor to refer to those who want to do things intuitively. And furthermore, I guess I would say there's a difference between, there may be a difference, at least, between doing things intuitively and doing things so spontaneously and acting in the moment, the way that the Aries energy talks about. So I don't know, you know, is there a fine line between those, or do they blend together more than they're different? That's, you know, that's an interpretation that's up to people. That's up to you guys, I guess. It's up to you, the viewers. But anyway, let us resume here. So moving on, it says, the Emperor can represent an encounter with authority or the assumption of power and control. As the regulator, he is often associated with legal matters, disciplinary actions, and officialdom in all its forms. He can also stand for an individual father or archetypal father as guide, protector, and provider. So remember 3 key areas to focus on this coming week: structure, authority, and power. Is there too much or too little in your life right now? You may also want to focus on your masculine side, even if you are female. This could provide some good material for meditation this week. So, yeah, more of this idea of focusing on one's masculine side, and also this idea of power is interesting in this card, this idea of power. The card is representative of leadership, indicates authority and self-mastery, ability to control and direct sexual drive. Goals can be reached. I guess that's another thing you could say with the Emperor, you know, this idea of being goal-oriented, which I would say certainly has its place, but as those who have watched my streams probably know by now, my personally, my only goal is to have as much fun as I can, feel as good as I can, and it ends up manifesting in all these forms that it takes, I guess, including doing these very streams. But yeah, that's certainly a very valid way of living one's life. You know, if you feel compatible with that, if you feel predisposed to that, this idea of having goals and being a go-getter for those goals, which the Emperor and the energy of Aries and Mars is very much all about, being a go-getter. Worldly power, confidence, wealth, stability, authority, indomitable spirit, war-making tendencies, father, brother, husband, male influence, domination of intelligence and reason over emotion and passion, patriarchal figure. Now there's an interesting area for analyzing this idea of domination of intelligence and reason over emotion and passion. So, intelligence and reason over emotion and passion. I think there are different kinds of human consciousness, at least as it is expressed in our physical form. I think there are people who are more at peace and more in alignment with who they really are when they're thinking more logically and more rationally and using reason as opposed to emotion or intuition or any of that kind of stuff. But though, everything is ultimately about the way you feel. You only want what you want because of the way you believe that getting what you want will make you feel. You believe that you'll feel better in the having of it. I don't care what it is. And that includes even one who seems very cold and unemotional. Well, you could say it's in that very cold, logical, rational approach that person finds their clarity, that feeling of peace or ease, which is a feeling, make no mistake, you know. So I would not be one to make such a differentiation between this idea of mental clarity and an emotion. I would say I would actually call clarity an emotion for all intents and purposes. And yes, there are some distinctions, and those should be looked at and definitely understood. It's a huge mistake to only look at things emotionally. It's a huge mistake. Like, there's, you know, you have the intellect for a reason. It's important to realize its importance, the intellect's importance, and the importance of the emotions. But that said, there will be some people that are more about the intellect, and there will be some people that are more about the emotion. Basically speaking, they're supposed to be that way. Without, I guess, getting deep into why that is. There are going to be people who choose to have human experiences, human life experiences that are exploring different parts of consciousness. And so some people are indeed going to be more intellectual, and other people are indeed going to be more emotional, and all are valid. I'm just saying that, if I can fix this blurriness here, that in general, both are very important. Let's see, you did an excellent job at breaking it down. Now I understand. Thank you, Tiombi, and I'm happy to help. I'm glad that you understand. Let's see, let me take just a breather here. The blur. All right, now where were we? Achievement. You need to be recognized as a strong figure of unquestioned achievement and authority. Focus your attention completely on your goal. You must not reveal your plans, feelings, or weaknesses. Status is vital. It's an interesting way of looking at things. Let me think about that for a moment. Let's see. Achievement. You need to be recognized as a strong figure of unquestioned achievement and authority. Focus your attention completely on your goal. You must not reveal your plans, feelings, or weaknesses. Status is vital. I guess that's important to consider too, this idea of focus, you know, and maybe we'll get more into this with other cards, but we might as well discuss it a little bit here, at least just briefly, because it is very important. So if you are goal oriented, or actually even if you aren't, if you're just trying to accomplish just about anything, it is necessary to direct your attention upon that thing and to really focus, indeed focus, like focus on your viewing, because the more things you divide your attention with, the less power you have, because attention, focus are power. Attention is power, focus is power. You know, there's this old, I guess, sort of new agey or whatever saying that says energy flows where attention goes. Well, that's very true. So if you're constantly dividing your attention between different things, when you're trying to accomplish something, you're literally dividing your energy, your power. You're dividing your power between different things, and then you don't get as much done. You don't get the kind of momentum going that would naturally ensue if you did allow the natural focus to take place and then allow the natural momentum to pick up. So indeed, attention and focus are vital for creation. And again, the Emperor representing that masculine side of the creative process. So let's see. The figure of the Emperor says much about the essential qualities of card 4. We see a stern, commanding figure seated on a stone slab throne. His back is straight, his eyes meet ours directly. He is confident of his complete authority to rule. The Emperor represents structure, order, and regulation, forces to balance the free-flowing, lavish abundance of the Empress. He advocates a four-square world. I think this book is repeating itself, but whatever. Let's just keep going. He advocates a four-square world where trains are on time, games are played by rules, and commanding officers are respected. In chaotic situations, the Emperor can indicate the need for organization. Loose ends should be tied up and wayward elements harnessed. In situations that are already over-controlled, he suggests the confining effect of those constraints. The Emperor can represent an encounter with authority or the assumption of power and control. As the regulator, he is often associated with legal matters, disciplinary actions, and officialdom in all its forms. He can also stand for an individual father or archetypal father in his role as guide, protector, and provider. Worldly authority, professional success, the life of action and decision, rulership, government, officialdom, patriarch, clan leader, or pater familiar, the yang, the masculine principle, benevolence, generosity, noblesse oblige, if I'm saying that correctly. The Emperor is the power of the government or decision-making body. Within yourself, there is also a force that governs your actions. These forces are willpower and self-control. You will have discussions concerning contractual agreements, profit sharing, subsidies, or management. If planning to visit the home of a relative, it will be postponed because of another, or someone could be lying to a relative or misrepresenting facts. I have no idea why it's saying that last part there about the relatives and stuff, or if that is even accurate. Maybe that's meant to be the Emperor reversed. I don't know, but take that with a grain of salt, I am saying. These forces are willpower and self-control. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of self-control, shall we? So, self-control, meaning mastery over oneself, meaning holding true to one's intentions, meaning directing your powers and abilities consciously and with determination and discipline, not giving in to contradictory desires or influences. So, I guess what I would say about that is just that it seems like a lot of people have this idea of self-control and also discipline, whereas they think that they have to really fight and struggle in order to control themselves enough in order to get what they want. And while you can go about things that way, that's not always, in fact, it's probably not even very often at all, the easiest route or the most ideal route, the quickest route to what you want and to your spiritual development. So when I think of this idea of self-control, well, I think self-control comes easiest when you simply line up your energy with whatever it is that you're doing. That's how I do it personally. Like, you don't have to try so hard to have self-control when your energy is already lined up with the thing that you're trying to do anyway. Like, then the control is natural. The control just flows, in fact. And yes, it does require some discipline and effort, yes, but the discipline and effort is about the focusing. It's not about this other stuff. You know, if there's a message that I really would want people to take away from the Emperor card, from me at least, it's that let like 99.99999%, let 99.99999, let all of your attention or let all of your effort and discipline be about your focus, the way that you are focusing your mind, the way that you are working with your vibration, because it all begins in the mind. It all begins with thought. You know, trying to control things through action is going about it the hard way. Like, yes, you're free to do that if you want, but it's much easier to focus your mind, control your mind, focus your energy, and then just let everything unfold from there. So let me see if I can try to bring this down to earth a little bit more real quick. And I don't want to get deep into this right now necessarily, but let's just say, so there's something that you really sort of kind of need to do, but you don't want to do it, but you need to, like it's for work or school or something, or it's a chore around the house or something, and you don't really want. Well, most people will tell you that if you're in that state, if you're procrastinating, to just force yourself to do it, just make yourself do it. And I'm here to tell you that that is some of the worst advice that anyone could ever give you. Now, it can work at times, though. Yes, I will admit. Why does it work? Because the doing of it can line up the energy, yes. But what I am saying, and the overall point I'm making here, is instead of forcing yourself to do the thing that you need to do, line up your energy first by focusing your mind. Get yourself, oh my God, I'm searching for the exact right words here, because I know people will misinterpret this if I don't say it exactly right. Make peace with the doing of the thing that you're wanting / needing to do first, and then do it. Because when you make peace with it first, it isn't this big struggle, because the struggle is what holds you apart longer from what you want. That's what I'm saying. And so when we have the Emperor card here and we have this idea of willpower and discipline, am I saying, people might be like, oh, well, aren't you in disagreement with that because you're all about, like, you know, letting things work out and whatever? And I say, no, I'm not in disagreement with it at all. Actually, I'm actually all for willpower and discipline, but I'm all for it in applying it to the focusing of one's mind. I'm all for willpower and discipline of focus, not so much or really even at all of action. I would say only force yourself to take action if that's the path of least resistance, if you don't really have any better way of going about it. But anyway, let's just move on. Want to see your ideals manifested on the physical plane in the form of material gain or accomplishment? An opportunity will arrive that could be the foundation of a very successful future. This will be a very propitious happenstance. I guess I can see how they're going to get that, but how they would get that from the Emperor card, but I don't know. I wouldn't say that consulting with the authority that the Emperor card represents necessarily guarantees success. It's just that you're moving in the right direction. You're taking a step in the right direction by consulting with that authority. But I wouldn't say it necessarily guarantees success. You know, you're still going to have to like take care of things. So that concludes the upright meanings part of this book. And then there are some keywords: authority, father figure, structure, regulation, solid foundation. Then we have some reversed meanings, but before we get to the reversed meanings, I'm going to take another brew. I'm going to give you guys some time to ask questions. Or I guess it says only one person is watching right now. Well, though that's not always accurate. Sometimes it says that and there's really more, but whatever. Whoever is watching right now, feel free to ask any questions if you want while I go to take off this hoodie, actually, because it's getting warmed up in here, getting quite warm. So go ahead and ask any questions that you have, and I'll be right back, and then we'll get on to the reverse meanings. All right. I think people are having hopefully a nice fun Saturday night. I'm actually getting significantly less viewers than usual in these streams. Not that I get very many to begin with usually, but not getting quite as many tonight, but that's all right. I'm sure that will most likely change throughout the night. That's usually what happens anyway. So let's get to these reversed meanings. And as always, this will be saved to my channel, my YouTube channel, once it's done, for anyone who wants to review it after. Reversed. The reversed emperor often indicates that you lack self-control, ambition, and the ability to deal with any kind of authority. In fact, you probably show contempt for any kind of order. This demonstrates a lack of self-respect, possibly stemming from a problematic relationship with a father figure, not necessarily your father, whereas mothering relationship with a parent that you are unable to escape, even if that parent is now dead. I wonder if that's supposed to say, or a smothering relationship with a parent. Don't know. This book has a number of typos, but whatever. Let's continue. Are you going to allow yourself to remain in bondage to the past for the rest of your life? Or are you going to resolve the relationship and move forward? The choice is yours and no one else's. Like there it says more forward instead of move forward, but whatever. Let me think if I have any comments on this though, real quick. Let's see, a lack of self-respect, possibly stemming from problematic relationship with a father figure. Well, I'm not sure if I agree necessarily with this idea that showing contempt for authority always means a lack of self-respect. Now, I do agree that showing contempt for any kind of authority is indeed a negative belief, and it is completely unreasonable. Like I said earlier in the stream, as the Emperor card reminds us, authority is a very natural and normal part of the human experience. So to have contempt for any kind of authority is not good. It's a negative belief, and someone who finds themselves in that state ought to examine their beliefs. I recommend find out why they believe what they believe, and endeavor to change those beliefs to positive beliefs. But as it says, it probably stems from a problematic relationship with a father figure, or a smothering relationship with a parent that you are unable to escape, even if that parent is now dead. Well, I guess I can see where they would get that connection, you know. That would teach the child that authority is bad, basically, and then they grow up believing they would grow up having that negative belief that all authority is bad. But as always, what does it come back to? It comes back to what I always recommend to people: this necessity of an examination of one's beliefs, of one's belief system, and questioning those beliefs. Asking, do they actually make sense? Do they actually make sense, and are they actually serving me? Because your beliefs form reality, as I always say. Let's see, what else do we have here? And it says, are you going to allow yourself to remain in bondage to the past for the rest of your life? Or are you going to resolve the relationship and move forward? The choice is yours and no one else's. Yeah, I would just, again, point out that it's my thesis that it's not so much necessarily, anyway, the negative or unwanted or contrasting event in the past that is causing the difficulty here, but instead it is the negative belief born out of that experience that is causing the difficulty. It's the negative belief itself that is the challenge, not what is causing it. There may be some exceptions to that, but I would say for the most part, again, it comes back to beliefs. And so, I don't know, I wouldn't be so quick to make a negative belief that is one of having contempt with authority about a problematic relationship with a parental figure in the past. I wouldn't be quick to make it about the past at all, in fact, because all of your power is in your now. Life is right now. Everything's happening right now, as is this live stream. Maybe that's why I like going live so much. It's all happening right now, except for the minor delay that does exist on YouTube by about, I think, 20 seconds or so. Or actually, I think it got shorter. I think it's more like 5 to 10 seconds now. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, but even that is happening right now. So moving on, it says, you may feel powerless when you receive the Emperor reversed. Dealing with authority is fraught with difficulties at this time, and whether this manifests as a dominant partner, problems with your father, or battles with officials, you do not seem to be making any headway. Basically, freedom lies within such structures now. This is not the time to rebel. Instead, try to contact your own need to control events and deal with any problems logically. Interesting. We'll be right back to Yombi. All right, see you in a bit. So let's see here. Do I have any commentary on this idea of this is not the time to rebel? Instead, try to contact your own need to control events and deal with any problems logically. Yeah, I would basically agree with that. Well, I definitely agree with this idea that I think there's a time to rebel and there's a time not to rebel. If you're going to rebel, let it be for an important reason. If you're going to rebel, make sure you're rebelling for something worth rebelling for. Don't be a rebel without a cause, as they say, because that's really just a waste of time, basically. And keep in mind, this is coming from me, poetic heretic, being of darkness and defiance. You know, I wouldn't say I'm all about rebellion per se, but I would say I'm largely about this idea of defiance. But it's not defiance for defiance's sake. It's well, I don't want to get deep into it right now. It's a lot more than this, but among other things, it's a strong statement I'm making to the world that I'm here to be who I am and do what I do, regardless of what anyone else says, thinks, or does. And that is the exact message that I have for other people, and that how I advise other people to live their lives if they want to, if that feels like that is in alignment with their wanting, basically speaking. So yeah, there's a time to rebel and it's time not to rebel. If you're going to rebel, or if you're going to defy, let it be for a good reason. You know, don't get caught up in doing it for no good reason, because then where's your foundation? Another thing that the Emperor card talks about, having a strong foundation. Reversed, the Emperor can suggest that there is an overuse and abuse of authoritative power surrounding you at this time. It could be originating from yourself or from another person, often a boss, partner, or a father figure. This could lead to tyranny and great disrespect and mistrust from peers. Alternatively, you may need to bring more structure into your life at this time. Things may have gotten quite chaotic recently, and now it is time to bring about order once again. So yes, I basically agree with that. Let me see here. Change from yourself and another person. This could lead to tyranny, great disrespect, and mistrust from peers. Alternatively, you may need to bring more structure to your life at this time. Things may have gotten quite chaotic recently. Now it's time to bring about order once again. Yeah, I can see that with the Emperor reversed. If reversed, there is presumption as to being head of the household with abuse of power inherent, an insecure man throwing his weight around, someone with a need for control. Indeed. Immaturity and confusion, problems with those you consider enemies, inability to reach goals, lack of energy, both emotional and physical, indicates a person weak in character, over-dependent on parents. Yeah, Emperor reversed, I could see that being the case as well. You know, not having that strong masculine drive, that that outward thrust, that go-getter mentality or go-getter. Ineffectiveness, indecision, inability, weakness of character, failure to control petty emotions. Yeah. This idea of controlling emotions, though, I would say, well, I don't know if it's control of emotions that you want per se, as much as it is focusing in a way that you bring your emotions into alignment, because your emotions are just a reflection of how you're thinking, of what you're thinking, of how you're focusing. They're just a reflection of the vibration that you're in. So we get into very tricky and dangerous territory potentially when we have this idea of, oh, let's control our emotions. Let's achieve emotional control. Well, true emotional control comes from knowing how to work with your energy and your psyche, basically speaking. Anyway, I'm going to check the integrity of the stream real quick, just make sure it's working right. If anyone has any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat. Welcome back, Tiambi. Any comments or questions, leave them in the chat, please. Any comments or questions, leave. Okay, we sound good. So, hello there, Melanie. Welcome to the stream. So that concludes our look at the Emperor card here in this book, but we will be looking up other interpretations as well. Hello, Jerry the Pope. Welcome to the stream. Let me just see something here. Again, if you guys have any comments or questions, leave them real quick, and then we're going to get right into additional meanings, and I'll give you, my thoughts on those as well. We'll get deep into the issues. Let's see here. All right. Also, I'm probably going to get off in about 24 minutes because that'll be the 2-hour mark, and then I'll have lunch, and then I'll come back and we will look at all this stuff some more. So now I'm just going to do a simple internet search here for the Emperor card, and we're going to see whatever comes up. So let's go to keen.com first. I would go to Biddy Tarot, but the ebook that I was reading is actually like from them, and so we would see a lot of the same material. But maybe later we'll go there because it is different a lot of times what they have on the website from the book, but a lot of it's also the same. So I'm not going to do that right now. Here, let's go to keen.com. See what they say. All right. I wonder if this was the website that I read an article on the Empress from last time and ended up really sort of laying down the gauntlet to the point that I almost felt bad for having to disagree with it so much. I don't know, I can't remember, but I guess, well, we'll see how this goes. We'll see what happens. Are you in control now? Has a situation bent to your authority? Have the principles you live your life by created an orderly world for you? Have you been obsessed with alphabetizing your collections and files or otherwise turned into an organizational obsessive? Is there an authority figure in your life showing you the way? All of these situations call forth the Emperor card from the tarot deck. This is the card that asserts authority, organizes systems to retain maximum control, and is the paternal influence of the tarot deck, assuring that protection and security are provided to all those playing by the rules. I like what I hear so far. A bearded man sits alone on a stone throne. His white beard extends to his chest. He is crowned and wears royal robes, but his legs and feet are still in a suit of armor. In his right hand he holds a royal staff of gold. In his left lobe, an orange sky glows behind him, lighting the mountainous landscape into a brilliant yellow. The ornamentation of the throne, though, does not glisten, as the ram skulls adorning the corners of his armrest and chair back are a solid gray stone. He is looking straight at you. The long beard is, of course, an indicator of wisdom accrued through age. The crown asserts his status. The staff and globe are his authority and his domain, respectively. He is still wearing armor, assuring us that he will do battle if necessary, but that his sitting on the throne alone should assert that which has already been established through conflicts now settled. The sky and background are unique in the tarot. The deck delivers cloudless blue skies on cards that favor positive outcomes, black backgrounds when there are hopeless elements to our situations, and all manners of grays and cloud formations to be interpreted as positive, negatives, and neutrals regarding your outlook. Let me think about that a bit, what this just said. Let's see. Sky and background are unique in the tarot. Yes, they are. Look at the sky and background on this card. That red-orange thing going on, or orange-yellow perhaps, going on. Representing that powerful sort of like Mars, masculine, fiery energy that this card is all about. Let's see here. Deck delivers cloudless blue skies and cards that favor positive outcomes. That seems to more or less be accurate, I think, anyway. I'd have to think about each individual card to see if I agree with that or not, but it's probably accurate, whatever. Let's see. An orange sky occurs in sunrises and sunsets near large bodies of water. The card that asserts so many absolutes again has the final word, as the Emperor himself is lit by the light that only exists at land's end. Interesting. Well, that kind of reminded me of something that I wanted to mention earlier, as it talks about, this idea of the water, like these sorts of orange skies near large bodies of water or whatever with this card. Well, and with it being a 4 and thus therefore associated with the sign of Cancer, which is water sign, emotional sign, but also ruled by Mars and officially ruled by Aries. Well, let me see if I can explain this. It's interesting to note further that Mars doesn't just rule Aries, Mars also rules Scorpio. And in like traditional or ancient astrology, it was just Mars ruling Aries and Scorpio. Today, we have both Mars and Pluto ruling Scorpio. And yet, there's still this very definite connection, right, between, how should I say this? Well, between Aries and Scorpio, because they're both being ruled by Mars. So let's think about that for a moment. There is a connection we can deduce from that or whatever between the signs of Aries and Scorpio. They both have that Mars energy. Well, when we gave Mars to, no, when we gave Pluto to Scorpio and Mars became, in a way, more exclusively associated with Aries, then Mars almost lost this, or I guess it kind of basically did lose this more watery, emotional side of it that it had before, at least from what I've heard, from what I've come across in studying astrology and tarot. And what I'm wondering here is, well, could there be that side to this Emperor card, right? So we have this idea that Mars has a watery emotional side, and we have the Emperor being card 4 corresponding to Cancer, a very emotional sign, a water sign. Well, I think there just might be some, it's subtle, it's definitely not a primary vibe of the card, but a subtle, like deep emotional connection with the Emperor card here, I would say. So there's that. Hell, you could even, let's see, well, if you want to talk a little bit about Scorpio, you could say, well, what card is that mostly associated with? That would be the Death card. That would be also, we're going to talk about Pluto ruling that card. We're going to talk about authority and hierarchy. We're going to talk about rulership. So another tie-in with the Emperor card, the word plutocracy, this idea of, authority and governmental structures and such things. I know Saturn and Capricorn also talk about that, but, that's kind of in yet another different way. But so, yeah, I think there's some interesting connections there. So give me just a second here. Getting lots of notifications tonight. Okay. So, does anyone have any comments or questions? Let's try to fix that blur. Let's go right ahead and resume this article. Wait a second. Okay. Meaning in past, present, and future positions. When your tarot reading is dealt out, the cards are placed in a pattern. Each position of this pattern represents your past, your present, or your future. The Emperor may represent you or someone in your life depending on where it lands in your reading. Well, I just want to point out here that that's kind of misleading what it just said, because not every tarot spread is going to have a past, present, and future position. Yes, those exist in the most common ones, including the very name of that past, present, future spread. And it also exists in the Celtic cross spread, but not every tarot spread is going to have a past, present, future position, so keep that in mind. In the past position, the Emperor represents a father or other authority figure who laid down the law and set a firm definition of acceptable behavior for you. Perhaps you rebelled against him or his teachings, or maybe they helped to keep you out of harm's way. If you are in a secure position now, you have the Emperor in this position to thank. But if some people do abuse their authority, and if you are alone and alienated after being witness to the abuse of authority, this card confirms that the blame is there. Often we are given rule over our world and mess things up ourselves. Other times, the trust that put us in the care of another is at fault when this person goes overboard, and so the Emperor represents a tyrant. I would say yes, that's a very real part of this card in a negative sense. When the Emperor is in the present position, you have the rule of law before you to guide you on your journey. This card is especially strong in the present position as it gives you an absolute confidence to move toward a goal. This can also represent the influence of another person in your life right now. Are you so enamored of a new friend or lover that you have started following the advice and lifestyle habits of him or her? Have you discovered a new hero in the arts whose work has expanded your consciousness to the point that it is hard to relate to people who have not had a similar reaction to this person's artistic outputs? Wait a minute, let me read that again. Have you discovered a new hero in the arts whose work has expanded your consciousness to the point that it is hard to relate to people who have not had a similar reaction to this person's artistic output? Huh. That's a weird sort of question to ask at that point, but whatever. I guess in a way it makes sense. Is there a new teacher in your life who has changed the way you think? Perhaps a new person at work is transforming the way you approach your on-the-job goals. The theme running through all of these possibilities is that one way of seeing the world is coming to dominate the way you experience life. Huh. That's an interesting perspective of the Emperor card, and I would say that's, potentially accurate indeed. Hello there, Katana Love. Welcome to the stream. We're going over interpretations of the Emperor card right now, and I'm giving my interpretations of the interpretations. The future position is an uncomfortable position for the Emperor. The days and weeks ahead are vague and quite affected by the smallest decisions of the here and now. The Emperor card demands to assert itself. When the Emperor card is here, anticipate a change to come into your life in a bold manner. Expectations to conform in the way you carry yourself may be part of this picture. Regardless of the situation, understand that new demands to follow a specific behavioral prescription will be coming your way and coming in the near future. Prepare now to submit, evade, or resist. It's an interesting perspective. Also, I'm answering any comments or questions if anyone has any. Let me take a moment to sort of absorb what this paragraph is saying, though. So let's see. Future position is an uncomfortable position for the Emperor. Days and weeks ahead are vague and quite affected by the smallest decisions of the here and now. I don't know if I necessarily interpret the Emperor in the future in that way. Like if I got it in the future position in a reading, probably interpret it more as like there's going to be some authority figure that I'm going to likely interact with, like if it was about me or if it or about whoever, whoever the querent is. There's going to be like a consultation with an authority figure. Let's see, the Emperor card demands to assert itself. Absolutely. The Emperor card, that's another big important thing to mention. This card is all about this idea of assertion, as is Aries, as is Mars. And assertion is necessary, a necessary part of life. Being assertive is a necessary part of life. Like I was saying earlier about, when are you going to raise awareness about injustices, or when are you going to speak up for injustices in your life or in others? I think the Emperor card can talk about that. When are you going to be bold enough to say to people, this is not okay, this is not right, this is not okay, and I'm not putting up with it anymore? When are you going to have that boldness of energy that the Emperor card talks about to say enough is enough? And again, it's part of my theory here that the Emperor is also going to be about strong boundaries. in part because of its connection and correspondence with the Devil card. So, I know I sure as hell in my own life am one to definitely not, just put up with injustices, basically speaking. And that's what I advise other people to do as well, if they want. Let's see. When the Emperor card is here, as in the future position, anticipate a change to come into your life in a bold manner. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Expectations to conform in the way you carry yourself may be part of this picture. To conform in the way you carry yourself may be part of this picture. Yeah, that makes sense. Regardless of the situation, understand that new demands to follow a specific behavioral prescription will be coming your way and coming in the near future. Coming your way. Yeah, new demands to follow a specific behavioral prescription. It's a very specific way of putting it, but yes. Prepare now to submit, evade, or resist. Yeah, that also makes sense. All right, next section is card combinations. Any questions? Any questions at all about this card, the tarot, related subjects, whatever? Let me know. I'm getting even more notifications. All right, cool. Just going to take a moment here, and we'll get right back to it. By the way, I'm only going to be live for 8 more minutes. That'll be the 2-hour mark. Once I've been streaming for 2 hours, that's when I'm going to get off and then come back later. So, card combinations. Your tarot reading features a selection of cards from the deck. While every card has its own complex meaning, each one has a relationship with other cards in the deck that is expressed when they join up in your reading. The presence of each card influences all of the cards spread before you. Numbered 4, the Emperor is related to card 14, Temperance. Ooh, this could get interesting. This is the card of self-discipline. When Temperance and the Emperor are in a reading together, it is a tarot reading reveling in your astounding level of self-control. Yes, I would say that makes sense. Also, there is going to be, I would say, most likely, almost certainly, a connection with the Strength card, card 8, which we will get to, well, I guess in 4 weeks. But maybe I can go over a little bit of that later, but I'm going to get deep into it now since we've only got 7 minutes left. When any of the minor arcana cards with the number 4 appear, this reading is underscoring aspects of the Emperor's reign. The 4 of Wands emphasizes establishing structures to make a joyous life. Makes sense. The 4 of Swords underscores the patience and virtue of the Emperor. Let's see, 4 of Swords underscores the patience and virtue. Ah, yes, that does make sense. The 4 of Pentacles reinforces the absolutes of this card and reminds us that in some circles, the Emperor is downright closed-minded, or as he is so set in his ways. Yes, 4 of Pentacles being all about, well, being about a number of things, but can often be about having too much order and structure, too much security, like being obsessed with like holding onto your money and stuff like that. So yeah, the 4 of Pentacles reinforces the absolutes of this card and reminds us that in some circles, the Emperor is downright closed-minded as he is so set in his ways. It's funny, this article, so many people make this mistake. This is kind of an aside and almost has nothing to do with the Emperor card, but then again, maybe it does. It's not close-minded, as the article says. It's closed-minded with a D at the end. It's closed-minded. Just like it's not, what is this other thing that people say? Oh shit, I can't think of it. Oh, people will say things like, might of done so-and-so. It's like, no, it's not might of, it is might have, might of. It's a contraction. Like, get your shit together. No offense or anything, but I'm sorry. I think the vibration of the Emperor card, now having done this stream for almost a full 2 hours, is rubbing off on me, like how bold and like tell it like it is kind of the Emperor card is. And I'm beginning to really just speak my mind about things where I normally would be more nice. So I apologize, but then again, this is the Emperor card, so I guess I don't really apologize. So there you have it. The Four of Cups is a card that convinces us to do without in the name of personal integrity, a hallmark of the Emperor. Let's see, Four of Cups convinces us. Yes, the Four of Cups, the card of satisfaction versus dissatisfaction and not seeing what the universe is trying to give to us, and, well, among other things. Convinces us to do without in the name of personal integrity, a hallmark of the Emperor. I'm not big on this idea of making sacrifices, though. I agree, there are times where it is indeed the path of least resistance to make sacrifices. I'm not disputing that. Just, I think a lot of times people, talk about this idea of like doing without to maintain personal integrity. People play that up just a little bit too much, in my opinion. They'll do that to be noble. They'll do that because they're trying to attain something that they think is beyond feeling good or beyond a feeling of relief or even perhaps beyond emotion itself. Now, I am not wanting to invalidate anyone who has that perspective. Your perspective is completely valid, and if that's your path, then I say absolutely, like, do as you will. I'm just saying that my perspective and like what I would advise people who want to follow my advice is that emphasis is a little too excessive, and really I'm wanting to place the emphasis more on how one feels, So make a sacrifice and do without if overall that is the more beneficial course of action. Like, don't be so self-sacrificing that you're making yourself miserable, is what I'm saying. In fact, don't be self-sacrificing if you don't really have to at all, in fact. So let's continue here. We've got 2 minutes. Well, just over. When the Chariot is in a reading with the Emperor, you will be rewarded with a leadership position after a hard-fought victory. That makes sense. When the Devil card is present, an authority figure is being cruel with you and those close to you, or you are abusing your authority and could be closer to a crisis than you realize. I would say that's accurate, but there's so many more potential interpretations if we had the Emperor card and the Devil card together, especially because they both talk about things like strong boundaries and order and structure, and maybe even this idea of manifestation. So, yeah, I would just throw that in there. The High Priestess interferes with the reign of the Emperor, as this card can represent a love interest far out of your league. It simply becomes a roadblock to your enjoyment of life. That's an interesting perspective. If the High Priestess is not pursued, though, you can benefit from the wisdom of a platonic friendship. Kind of talking about that idea of temptation or whatever. Again, I would say make it about what you want and going after what you want and fulfilling your desires, if you're wanting to take my advice, at least. The Empress is the best card to pair up with the Emperor in your reading, as she is open-minded enough to balance the rigidity of the Emperor, but still regal enough that you can succeed on your own well-established terms. Yes, absolutely. And again, yeah, the Empress is the feminine counterpart to the Emperor. And so, indeed, that's about as good of a match for the Emperor as it gets, basically speaking. Also, that completes what that website has to say about the Emperor card. And it's right around the 2-hour mark of the stream. In fact, we have it now. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I will be back after I have lunch. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. When I come back after an hour or two or whatever, because I might want to get some other things done as well before I come back. we will dive even deeper into the Emperor card, and hopefully I can give you all of my ideas, thoughts, interpretations on all of these matters relating to the Emperor card, and it should be a lot of fun. And so I will see you then in another hour or two or so. So thank you everyone who has been watching. See you soon.